Let's have a chat about why sometimes a single Japanese word has multiple kanji. I'm not talking about things like listen kiku and be effective kiku because I consider these to be different words. But I'm talking about things like the word toru being written like this or this or this or this, or utao being written like this or this. Why does that happen, and how can you, as a learner of Japanese, navigate your way through this? So first off, why? Honestly, it'd be more surprising if not. Because remember, kanji came from Chinese characters, and China just kind of dropped the Chinese writing system on Japan and said, here you go. They're for writing classical Chinese. Enjoy. So Japanese people had to figure out, how to use them, as I've talked about in this video. In doing so, of course, they came into something that is totally expected, which is differences between Chinese and Japanese. Because different languages have different ways of saying things, and different languages have different differentiations between various objects. As a thought experiment, for instance, let's say that England and Japan were historically right next to each other. And, to make this easy, let's say that their ancient forms sounded exactly like their current forms do. If, for instance, the first speakers of English developed a character-based writing system for English, and that was adopted by Japan, it would make sense, for instance, that we would have some kind of character to represent the word funny, and some kind of character to represent the word interesting. But when these went over to Japan, Japanese people would use both of them to write the word omoshiroi because they don't have specific words for those two adjectives. And as a result, you'd have two representations of omoshiroi going around, which, of course, because way back in the past, there wasn't like formal writing system guidelines or national education or anything like that, would be used more or less interchangeably without anyone really kind of complaining because the number of people that could actually read was pretty low and they would be expected to know both versions. A consistent writing system would not have been a thing back then. On the other hand, if Japan developed its own character-based system that was adopted into English, so we would use it now, they would obviously develop different characters for samui and sumetai because these are different concepts for them. But in English, we just have cold. However, the English scholars of Japanese who were first like, wait, I don't want to write Japanese with this, I want to write English with it, might have differentiated the representation of the word cold using the two kanji, depending on if it was, cold in general, temperature cold, or cold to the touch. So the idea that one word could have multiple kanji for it is something that really actually kind of makes sense, as frustrating as it may be for you as a learner right now. So how do you navigate your way through this? If you encounter different ways of representing a single word, or you see someone writing it in a specific way, how can you know what's going on? Well, in some cases, the variant is just old, and that's basically all there is to it. For instance, this is an old way of writing the word you, or to say, imasu. You'll see it sometimes, in the same way you'll see people in English writing things like ye, oli, whatever, because it gives old-fashioned vibes. I have to know it because sometimes I read things that are written in the 1940s, 1930s, etc., but generally speaking, you kind of don't, and there isn't really a meaning kind of base. Indeed, if you see a variant and it's not on the Joyo kanji list, it's probably just an idiosyncrasy or somebody trying to either give an old vibe or, in some cases, show off how many kanji they know. For example, a long time ago, I wrote a blog post which in part contained a discussion of every single variant that exists for the kanji utao, and there's over like 20 of them. But most of these are actually just variants of variants with no meaning difference between them, and if you were to use them, the first response would probably not be, wow, you really nailed the obscure meaning that is hiding in that kanji. It would be, why do you know that, and why are you using it? Indeed, one thing I think a lot of learners of Japanese struggle with, I struggled with it, is that sometimes just because you know a kanji doesn't mean you should use it. Some words are normatively not written in kanji, and that's what people expect. And you can't forget that, just using a kanji that's super difficult or super obscure may seem cool to you because you spent time learning it, but it may be a literacy impediment for other people. In other cases, though, there are words that show very common variation between a number of different forms. So, which do you use? For instance, toru, to take, right? There's a lot of different torus that you can choose from. If you haven't passed N2 or so, I'd say just pick the basic one, because for all of these, there's going to be one that is like you can use this no matter what. And you can find out which one is the norm, basically because, well, it's probably the first one you learned, but also if you go into your computer and hit spacebar, sometimes the kanji representations will have a little book next to them. And this means that if you wait, it'll actually describe the different nuances of the kanji. But the one that has ippanteki written next to it is the one that is general and can be used for basically anything. So whatever you toru, that's a kanji that you can use. These little guides, though, are a good way to figure out the nuances of the other ones. For instance, this here notes that this toru is used for taking pictures, this one is used for recording things, and this one is used for when you bag an animal that you've killed. Similarly, another kanji that has a bunch of different representations is hakaru here, because that means to count or to measure, and these ones are actually pretty commonly used depending on what you count or measure, with the big description being length, time, and weight. But what if you can't read Japanese to a level to read these little guides? Or what if in some cases the guides aren't there? Well, in some cases the guides aren't there because they aren't different kanji for the same word, they're different words. For instance, if you look up kiru, you'll see the two different kanji here, and the reason that that one there doesn't have a book next to it is that the ones with books are variants of cut. You have generic cut head off, and then specifically for cut a tree. Although do note that that joyo guy thing there means that it is not on the joyo kanji list. This one doesn't because that's not cut, that is wear. Indeed, it's an entirely different verb. It's a ru verb instead of an u verb. And of course you can find that out by looking it up in your dictionary. But let's actually look at like utao. There's a lot of these and maybe your Japanese isn't ready to read it. But one thing you can do is just kind of take those kanji and see what other words are used to write them, and that will help you out. For instance, this version of utao here is specifically used when you are singing like poetry. And you could probably guess that if you knew that this kanji was also used to write the verb yomu, which means to write poetry. Yes, shio-yomu could be read or write poetry in speech, but thankfully kanji help us figure it out in writing. Told you they were great. Likewise, if we go back to toru, the one that's used for taking pictures, video, etc. is used in words like satsue, which is, to take pictures and videos. Whereas the one that's used for like to take blood is used in words like this, which of course relate to that similarly. And the one that I mentioned for use in hunting is used in hunting words, like you can see now. So even just looking up the kanji in a dictionary can help you find that specificity. Like this toru here is pretty rare, but that's the kanji for steal, so you can guess what kind of taking that is. This is taking a bath, this is stealing a bath. So it goes. All in all then, these can be helpful to know, especially if you're reading a lot of things, like if you read a lot of samurai manga, you'll probably see the cut off head one, and that can make, oh okay, they're not just cutting paper, they're cutting a head off. But most of them aren't ones that you'll really have to need to know or kind of use in day to day. Some, like the tutorial for video one, are pretty common, but others are far from mandatory. And if you want to, in your own writing, just stick to the Ippon-teki one, that's actually just fine. And I think some people would probably appreciate it, as using these variants, while fun, can be seen as pretentious, etc. Like this version of sing is specifically used for the kind of the chanting in no plays, etc. And if you use that to someone who's a fan of no, they'll probably be like, wow, that's really good. But if you just use that in like a tweet or a text or something to be like, hey, I'm going to sing a song, people might not be able to read what you're writing or find it confusing. Unfortunately, in prepping for this video, I actually went online and tried to see if I could find a good English guide to these. Like, a list of common words with multiple kanji and what the kanji mean, and I couldn't. So I'm going to try to write one, and hopefully it'll be out within a month or two of this video. I am going to be the change that I want to see in the world, but later because I'm busy. Until then, I hope this was helpful and will be useful the next time you meet. This version of ao is used specifically when you encounter something which is unpleasant. That's why it appears in this word, which means an unpleasant encounter, such as with a bear. A kanji that you haven't seen before.